Welcome to Conscious Conversations. My name's Luke McLean. I'm a life coach and I'm a meditation teacher. I created this little podcast to help people learn to live more authentic and purposeful lives. That's what I do in my job, and I think this podcast is a transition to it. I catch up with people who are living really authentic to their values and their life story. I then look at the tools and the framework that they're using to live that way and discuss their life journey and hopefully pass on a few nuggets to you along the way. That's the whole idea of this podcast. So if it's your first time to it, I hope you get something out of it. If it's not, welcome back, and I hope this conversation's a really good one for you. This week I've got Chris Wilson. Chris Wilson is a yoga teacher and he owns Yoke Yoga. He's got a couple of studios around Victoria. He's got one in South Melbourne and he's got one in Torquay. They're beautiful studios and he delivers an amazing yoga product. He's also a really nice guy, very spacious in his conversation, really mindful. So it was really nice to sit down with him and discuss, firstly, his journey through yoga, and then how does he hold the tension between really living that authentic yoga lifestyle and true to that, but also run a really highly performing and functional business. So that was the conversation foundation, if you like, and we really get into the weeds of that a little bit more. So I hope you like it. This is a really good chat, but this is Chris Wilson.
You've been waiting around long enough. The moment is here and you better stand up. It's time. You better stand up. It's time. You better stand up. It's time. You better stand up.
Chris from Yoke Yoga, welcome, mate. Really great to have you on the podcast. Chris, I just wanted to start with yoga and sort of how it began for you. Like, where did yoga begin? Was it at a really early age, or was it something that you discovered later on?
I think I've always been interested in, life or consciousness. I've always been a navel gazer, so I've always been into yoga, even though I perhaps didn't know I was into yoga. But I guess the turning point for me when I started to get into yoga officially was in my early 20s. I used to party a lot and I used to get high and get low and get high and have emotional roller coaster going on. And yoga was a means to provide a bit of stability for me. I was doing uni at the time and I was able to use yoga to finish my degree, even though I was riddled with anxieties and stresses. And a turning point for me, or a moment, I noticed that was part of the question, was what moment. And when I was about 25, 26, I moved to Canada on a whim. I broke up with my girlfriend at the time, and I, it was a bit of a sort of crisis moment in life. I said, I'm going to Canada, and I was living there, and I was practicing at the local yoga studio and decided to do a teacher training. And there was I remember I was pretty lonely in Vancouver where I was living, and it was cold and there wasn't much sun. And I was riding home from a training one night, and it was sleeting, cold weather. I was kind of lonely, and yet there was this quality of bliss, or this quality of ease that was there. I'm like, I can be lonely and wet and yet still have a quality of ease. This is great. This is awesome. So that was when I diverted my path from the studies that I was doing at uni to devoting into yoga and practicing and teaching.
And I think it's an amazing articulation of a moment in time that you can still reflect on now and remember, which is obviously super important. Before the decision to do the yoga teacher training, can you talk through what the story was when you're in Canada to actually take that step or that leap to learn to teach?
Yeah, well, I was labouring at the time to make money, and I had a lead to go and work in some environmental studies, which is what I was doing, working on the Queen Charlotte Islands, which was a long way away, and I ended up pulling the pin on that. But as I was labouring, as I said, I didn't have many friends, and this community was really pulling me, the yoga community that I was hanging out with, and I don't know, they were running a teacher training. I don't really know why. It was just something that happened. Just
follow the heart a little bit.
It just felt like the right thing to do. It was like a natural progression from loving a community, loving yoga. Let's dive deeper into this and see what happens.
Yeah, I get fascinated whenever I talk to people as around the decisions. At times they might not seem big decisions, but they're the decisions that then shape our life. Like a decision to take on a teacher training that then comes down to 10, 15 years on, and it's created a complete life from a simple seed that's planted in Canada when you don't know anyone, and that people could take more decisions that shape their destiny, and understanding the importance of those.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, it's always, and the decisions we make have huge impacts on other people, but also it impacts a lot of other things positively and negatively sometimes. The decision to run a marathon could connect to lose weight, to meet new friends, to spend more time outside. Like there's one decision that creates like a circle of impact within your life. Yoga back when you're in Canada, what was that like? Could you describe that community, and especially being in Canada, how was that?
It was awesome. There wasn't a community like that in Australia yet. We had, it was at Sempre Viva Yoga in Vancouver, and there was awesome international yoga teachers. Mark Whitwell came. There were a lot who's an amazing teacher, studied with Krishnamacharya, Rolf Gates, and lots of incredible teachers came from around the place and led workshops and trainings there. So it was a great place to get really good yoga. And also there was, again, I said that sense of community that we didn't necessarily have in Australia at the yoga studios. There's just a buzz amongst the teachers and amongst the people coming in and out of the classes. It was a good vibe. And that was what inspired me to open up a studio, actually, because I felt that was required here. I felt there was a need for that, particularly for the teachers. It was kind of lonely coming back and teaching in Melbourne, and you're talking about all this heart stuff, talking about life, and you're just sort of writing it in your little journal, and it's kind of, I'm navel gazing here and exploring life and sharing it with the students, and then going back and navel gazing. But I would have loved to have had a network of teachers to share that with and grow together with, so that's what inspired me to open up a yoga studio, is to create that community of teachers.
Okay. And back, obviously on reflection now, you're aware of it, but back then, were you aware of the quality of teaching that you were actually getting in Canada at the time?
I knew it was something. I mean, I had some pretty good teachers in Australia. In particular, when I was living in Byron, a guy, Lance Schuler, was a great asana teacher. But it was the first time I got that, I guess you might call it transformational teaching, and having those life epiphanies in a class and outside of class, really making it a lifestyle versus just go and do a yoga class and get out of there sort of thing. So I did notice a difference between the quality of teachers there and what I was getting in Australia.
And what was the timeline between getting that teacher training and then coming back to Australia to then sort of immerse yourself into that opening of a studio?
I came back, I was in Canada for a bit over 8 months, and then I came back and was teaching for about 2 years before, maybe 3 years, and then opened up a studio.
And in those 2 to 3 years, what were you learning then? How was that growth phase for you?
It was, the first 6 months of being a teacher is a massive learning curve. And you just kind of fake it till you make it. I didn't really know what I was talking about. I was just pulling in quotes from teachers that I loved and just kind of leaning on the wisdom of other teachers, and which kind of works in a way, but I wasn't really teaching from my own experience as much. But I think I had a really good time. I was kind of, it was all exciting, and yoga was pretty green back in those days, so I was teaching classes that people hadn't necessarily seen as much here, so it was I was reasonably popular, I guess, back in those days as a teacher, which was nice. It was just the early days. It was fun. I used to teach classes at my parents have a property out in the Yarra Valley, so I used to teach classes in a little cellar door out there and have farmers come in and, all sorts of different crew from different places come in.
Yeah.
That was fun. That was nice. I got to know those guys really well. They would text me and say, "Hey, Chris, is class on tonight?" I'd be,
Yeah.
That was cool.
Cool. And then I guess, and I think this is a really nice transition in terms of sort of that fake it till you make it type mentality, to where you really discover or start to discover what your version of yoga is and what those quotes that you've taken from other people mean to you, and how you talk about that from personal meaning as opposed to just from, I like the words and I'll use those.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how that's gone for you over, what year were we talking, sort of back in Canada was that sort of early 2000s?
It was 2006.
Yep. So mid 2000s, yeah.
Yeah. So, it means in terms of when I started to just trust my own words.
Yeah, and it started to, your yoga journey took shape for you.
I think it was a slow burn, that one.
Yeah.
It's still evolving. I still feel like I'm brand new to this, to be honest. Been doing it for a while now. But I see all the learning from other teachers and taking their words. I don't really see anything wrong with that. But as you say, embodying it is important, in that I've had great learnings from great teachers, or just a quote that you read that kind of resonates. And what I've learned and what we teach in our teacher trainings, etc., is how to, sense that, feel that in your body, how that relates to you personally, to me, and then just communicate that. And so, that's been a slow evolution. And yoga is a pretty deep, as is meditation. We're inquiring into pretty subtle stuff. So, a lot of the times it can be confusing. It's a interesting journey, and I think sitting in that space of listening or not really knowing is a nice place to teach from. Like, I don't know what's going on, but hey, let's just share what I'm learning.
And I think it's sometimes, my personal practice, it's when you think you know it, that's when you really don't know it. But it's when you're exploring and open to not knowing, is when you're actually probably what you're saying to other people is really dialed in, and it's actually having an impact because you are so receptive to whatever else is coming in.
Right.
That's personally.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think the same. Yeah.
And how would you describe your relationship to yoga? Like, if you're going to summarize it, what's it like?
I think yoga is everything. It's always happening all the time. It's not like it happens and then it doesn't happen. It's a constant inquiry into what the hell's happening here. What's the truth of this moment? So for me, you say, what is yoga like? And it's largely around listening, being receptive to life, so to speak.
Yeah.
Life as it's occurring.
Yeah.